On Saturday, November 14th, the Million Maga March drew hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters from all across the country. Americans are getting angry at what the media and the establishment has done to our freedoms, currently at the expense of undermining our election integrity. However, this is only the beginning, and Americans need to prepare for some challenging times ahead in order for President Trump to secure this election fairly. The extent of voter fraud is so obvious that it's quite clear the Democrats never intended to hide this from the public, instead hoping that their mainstream media cohorts could help distract voters and demoralize Trump supporters.
We did it, Joe. You're gonna be the next president of the United States.
By announcing Biden as the projected winner, falsely labeling him as president-elect, and promoting plans for the next Biden administration, the media, including Fox News, which has now turned to the dark side, is framing the narrative that Trump's claims of voter fraud are baseless and he should just concede. However, the truth and the forces of good always prevail. With the overwhelming amount of voter fraud evidence and mathematical inconsistencies, Trump has the upper hand in getting reelected after this is settled in court. What's becoming even more important than who wins is the integrity of our election process moving forward. This should concern all Americans, regardless of whether you are Democrat or Republican. We are not going to ignore the numerous instances of voter fraud caught on camera, statements released by whistleblowers and postal workers on mail-in ballots, and the recent evidence discovered by Sidney Powell involving the millions of Trump votes deleted on the Dominion voting system.
Well, I can hardly wait to put forth all the evidence we have collected on Dominion, starting with the fact it was created to produce altered voting results in Venezuela for Hugo Chavez, and then shipped internationally to manipulate votes for purchase in other countries, including this one. It was funded by money from Venezuela and Cuba, and China has a role in it also. So if you want to talk about foreign election interference, we certainly have it now. We have staggering statistical evidence. We have staggering testimony from witnesses, including one who was personally in briefings when all of this was discussed and planned, beginning with Hugo Chavez and how it was designed there, and then saw it happening in this country. As soon as the state shut down on election night and stopped counting, those are the states where the most egregious problems occurred. We also need to look at, and we're beginning to collect evidence on the financial interests of some of the governors and secretaries of state who actually bought into the Dominion systems, surprisingly enough.
This is becoming a much bigger issue than domestic voter fraud. Another voting machine company called Seidel, also widely used in US elections, is located in Spain. As Great Game India reports, quote, days after it was revealed how 2020 US elections were rigged by Canadian Crown agent Dominion voting systems through a so-called glitch, now Great Game India has found involvement of another dubious foreign company in US election meddling. The votes cast by Americans were counted by a bankrupted Spanish company, Seidel, in Spain. Like Dominion voting systems, Seidel has a long history of election fraud in various nations, including injecting backdoors in its election software. The issue has prompted experts to question why the sensitive job of counting votes was outsourced to a foreign company. How could a bankrupted Spanish company count American votes in Spain? Due to such widespread fraud, the chairman of the U.S. Federal Election Commission, Trey Traynor, believes that the 2020 U.S. presidential elections is illegitimate, unquote. We are no doubt witnessing a coup against the president, and the globalist power structure has been planning this for quite some time with many different foreign interests. Although they are good in making diabolical plans, Trump is smarter and is always staying one step ahead of them. In fact, some of what we are seeing in Trump's playbook brings us back to something we witnessed during the 2016 election. Remember Peter Strzok and his little insurance policy that was revealed in text messages with Lisa Paige? This exchange was meant to convey that the FBI needed to aggressively investigate allegations of Russia collusion in the Trump campaign, with the help of the unverified Steele dossier and wiretapping former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. The text that Strzok sent to Lisa Paige on August 15, 2016 read, "I want to believe the path you threw out in former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's office, that there was no way he gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take the risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Oh my, how the tables have turned, my friends, because now Trump has his own insurance policy, except this time it's based on truth, not the fictitious narrative of Russia collusion." In a recent article posted on Natural News, Mike Adams makes a reference to something very important Trump did back in September of 2018. Executive order on imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. Adams writes, quote, "In that executive order, which almost no one has covered since the day it was signed, President Trump declares a national emergency. That emergency is still in play to this day, and the 2020 election was conducted under this state of emergency, which is a crucial point to understand what's coming next." Unquote. In the EO, the president also states that people and organizations located in part outside the US are known to be able to interfere in or undermine public confidence in United States elections, including through the unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure, or the covert distribution of propaganda and misinformation. And yep, you guessed it, all of the major media organizations have been caught under this emergency declaration of foreign interference in US elections, aided by complicit corporations on US soil. The EO further states that this constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Why is this relevant to the election fraud we're seeing now? Because Dominion Voting Systems is foreign-owned, a Canadian company. Scytl, which is connected to George Soros and the Democrats, is a Spanish-owned company. These voting systems are now making the election theft into a foreign interference issue. Some of these servers for Scytl and Dominion are offshore in places like Germany, Serbia, China, and Venezuela. This is foreign interference on a massive scale. Trump's 2018 executive order gives the DOJ the power to seize all assets of individuals and entities who have, quote, directly or indirectly engaged in, sponsored, concealed, or otherwise been complicit in foreign interference in a United States election, unquote. That would, of course, have to include CEOs and journalists from big tech and the mainstream media. They are all complicit in gaslighting America and covering up the massive foreign interference that just took place. Adams writes, quote, "Trump has already won this election. Once all the evidence is compiled and presented, President Trump merely needs to declare the entire election to be null and void as an artifact of a failed foreign coup attempt against the United States, aided by treasonous operators inside the Democrat Party and certain dark corners of the intelligence community, CIA, FBI, etc. The American people are with Trump, including many Democrats who are now sickened by what they witnessed take place with wholesale left-wing election theft. Americans will not allow their country to be stolen by foreign interests. If Trump needs to call up every able-bodied man in America to converge on Washington, D.C., fully armed with courage, millions of patriots will arrive to defend this constitutional republic against its enemies, both foreign and domestic. We win if we choose to win. The only way we lose is if we surrender to the criminals on the left." Unquote. So there you have it, folks. All that Trump needs to do at this point is to keep gathering and presenting the evidence. He will no longer need to win recounts, and he won't need the media on his side because they won't be around much longer anyways. Once the results are overturned and Trump is officially re-elected, we are going to see this attempted coup go into full force. There will be Antifa riots like never before, and the country will go into military lockdown. Be prepared, stock up on emergency supplies, and hang on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a bumpy ride. We must defend this nation at all costs.